We welcome for the second time, I think, in the Viet,
Yes.
Evelien Agache. She has more than 24 years of experience in the food science and technology sector. She holds a master's degree in bioengineering, complemented with executive education at Fleric and INSEAD. And today she's the business unit director for bakery improvers, mixes, emulsifiers, and enzymes at PURATOS. And she's going to speak about the science behind melting texture in fried pastries. Welcome, Evelien.
Thank you, Irene, for the introduction. Good morning, or should I say already good afternoon for some of us. The very last presentation of this session. Thank you for staying so numerous still here in this room. Let me start with a question. Have you ever bitten in a pastry that is so soft, so moist, so short, that it's really melting away completely in your mouth? And so that's not just magic, that's science behind. And that's where we will go deeper, in fact, in the science behind melting texture in fried pastries. And so by the end of the presentation, you will know how the solution is to get to that. And as well, eventually, you will know when you will be able to taste it. So what's on the menu for the next 25 minutes? We will first have a look what 20,000 consumers have to say, have to tell us, in fact, about their pastry preferences. Then we will dive more into the science. So what is a product making soft, short, and eventually melting? And we will see as well what the impact is of flour, of the process, besides the different enzymes technologies. And we will see as well how an innovative enzyme technology inspired by nature is helping us in creating this melting texture. And eventually, of course, we will deep dive a bit more into the products. So how do we know at PURATOS what consumers want? We rely on our Taste Tomorrow study, on our always-on consumer insights. So it's a quantitative survey of over 20,000 consumers in more than 50 countries. So wherever we go, we are able to deep dive per country on what are really the local preferences. We include as well a community of experts, and we also include researchers. And what is also new in the last years is that we more and more use digital techniques, AI, as an always-on trend radar. So what does it mean? Whenever there are some new trends, every day we are picking up some new things, and when it's really, really a trend, we will very fastly seeing it picking up, and our teams will take it along as really a trend where we need to deep dive in. When we ask, in fact, the final consumers, what are your key considerations in buying sweet pastry? Then we see that 3 are topping the list. So it's taste, its price, and its freshness. And then the 4th one, it's appearance. The eye also wants something. But for me, for a sweet pastry, freshness and taste is completely going together. You cannot really distinguish the two. They really go together in a sweet pastry. And there it's, of course, where texture pops in. When we look all over the world in fried goods, there is a lot of diversity. So if you start here in Spain from the churros, but then if we go to Sonhos in Brazil, have you ever heard already of the Cook Sisters in South Africa, or the Berliners in Germany, to the classic donut, for example, in the US. So if we still stand a little bit on the classic donut in the US, we have seen, in fact, that on donuts alone, only in 1 year time, we have seen more than 8% growth in online conversations globally. So this is only on donuts. So it's not just a trend, it's really a movement as well into the direction of fried goods. And yes, we all want to eat healthier. We all say that. But when it really goes in real indulgence, we really want it to be worth it. So when you really go into a real indulgent treat, it seems still so hard to resist and still take a piece. Let's dive a bit deeper. What's behind? How do we want to improve those fried pastries? And in here you will see, in fact, 5 different texture parameters that we find very important in describing a fried pastry. So you start with softness, then resilience, moistness, short bite, and melting is some of the parameters you have already hearing passing by this morning and as well yesterday. So softness, it's when you press a product, is the hardness you need to, it's how hard you need to press on it. Resilience, so you are really taking care if you press, how much it's returning to the original state, but as well how fast it is going. For moistness, you will of course eat it, but you will typically as well take a little bit of a piece of crumb and you will roll it between your fingers. If it's crumbling away, it will be very dry. If it's really ball forming, it will be more moist. If it's too moist, it can be very sticky. Short bite, here you see it on a donut. You will typically take a product and you will see in fact what is the force to tear it in two. And then melting is a complete experience. So for melting, we really say it's a combination of softness, resilience, moistness, and short bite. But it's really the experience when you eat a product and you really feel it completely melting away in your mouth. So let's have a look. So we have mapped 8 different brands of donuts from all around the world. And we have mapped them on a principal component analysis map. So what does it mean? We ask, in fact, to different experts to evaluate the different sensorial evaluations that I just explained before. These are the ones that are put in red. And we complement them with some measurements. So the hardness is put on the other side of the softness. I will still come back on how we measure the short bite is the total work. So it's on the other side, and elasticity has also been taken into account. So you see these 8 brands are very nicely positioned, very different. A question is then, what do consumers really prefer? So which texture would be their preference? We have seen, in fact, that the preference, and then for sure in Europe, is more into the side of soft, a lot of short bites, and really that melting texture. You have it a little bit less in the US, but certainly in Europe, this is the preference. And even if you go to Asia, it's even much, much more pronounced. If you are producing donuts and you would be curious where would your product be on the map, we will just repeat this exercise once again. So you can always contact me and we can include your products. What we will map as well, we will give them all those same products to our Sensobus, so that we can, in fact, have the opinion of 300 consumers all in one day in one specific country, and then we can easily map the two on each other and really see a heat map of the preferred product. For the ones paying attention, you might have seen that there are 9 donuts on the map, not 8. So one company, one brand gave us, in fact, 2 products that were made with a different process. So one process was made with dividing, another process was made with extrusion. So if you would have you still have another process that is frequently used, that is sheeting, that would be more or less in the middle. So in this case, you see, in fact, that extrusion was more in the area of the preferred texture. So it was only with this brand. That might have been because with extrusion, you have much more fat uptake. So more fat gives as well a more melting texture. So that might be one of the reasons. But then, of course, we set out a question. We see more and more companies moving away from extrusion, going more and more into dividing or in sheeting. How can we recreate such a melting texture using dividing or sheeting techniques? So that's the challenge we went for. And yeah, for us, bringing dough, the texture to the next level is really including that melting texture. And I will show a little video that will reveal already partly on what we will explain further.
Enzymes are proteins present in every living organism, including the flour we use for making bread. Inspired by nature, PURATOS has been traveling to some of the world's most remote locations in search of new enzymes to bring innovations into our products to make the best breads. In the hot springs of Yellowstone National Park, researchers discovered an intriguing enzyme, a protease that has optimal activity at temperatures significantly higher than regular ones. This heat-stable protease creates a pleasant short bite in rich breads without impacting volume or resilience. A classic protease begins to cleave protein bonds present in gluten at room temperature. This means that during mixing and fermentation, the gluten network is already in the process of breaking down, which increases dough stickiness and weakens the dough. This may result in bread with lower volume and a more open crumb. In contrast, the Yellowstone protease is not active during dough making and activates only at the initial stages of baking. Using this Yellowstone protease allows normal dough mixing and handling, which results in bread with a better short bite, securing consistent quality. Whether it's brioche, sweet buns, panettone, or donuts.
So this video has shortly taken us to a wonderful place. So it's Yellowstone National Park in the US. Anyone has ever been? No? I had the pleasure, in fact, to be there a few years ago. It's even a picture I've taken. And when you are, in fact, standing in front of that colorful hot spring, it's a Grand Prismatic Spring, you see even an indication of a sign that is mentioning that in the orange edges of that hot spring, the most extraordinary microorganisms are living there that are really thriving into heat. And these are producing, in fact, proteases. So like you have seen in the video, these proteases are working at higher temperatures. And these proteases are as well giving, in fact, a short bite, a more melting texture in fried goods. In fried goods, where you have during the frying process, it's only a very short process and it's very intense. So let's have a closer look how it is all working. You have seen a graph in the video as well. The enzyme is only working at higher temperatures, so you will not feel anything to the dough. We will still come to that when we have a graph of the Mixolab that will show you that you don't have any effect in your dough rheology of your dough. And then, of course, at higher temperatures, you will see as well when we look into the different activity curves at different temperatures, the higher we go in temperatures. So, for example, in a frying process, it will only start working in the early phases that you start frying. And the higher you go in temperature, the enzyme will, of course, be completely denatured. We have had already some more explanations this morning as well on the different components. But when we look in the wheat flour, we have, of course, the wheat proteins. When you combine it with water, you have the gluten that is being formed with the main components, gliadins and glutenins. And this is really giving the structure to a dough. But to create that melting texture, we will need to partially break down, but very selectively, that gluten structure. And so what is happening then, in fact, when we make here the comparison between a control bread and a bread where the Yellowstone protease has been added, we do see that we have a movement of the higher molecular weight glutenins, in fact, are being, there is protein hydrolysis ongoing, which makes that you have, in fact, a much higher quantity of lower molecular weight peptides. What is happening? Nothing is happening in the dough. because if you see the two curves, they are dotted of the control dough and the Yellowstone protease dough. They are completely one on the other. But if you look to the bread, you do see a shift. So it's with HPLC, so you see, in fact, the illusion based on the size of the components. So you see that more smaller components are being released. In this graph, you see, in fact, that the extractability is going down at higher temperatures, and it's partially counteracted, in fact, by the lower molecular weight peptides that are being released. But what is important to remember out of this graph is that we can do this protein hydrolysis very selectively. So you still keep your dough structure with your gluten network, and you only partially break it down, but still keeping your volume, but you will have your effect on the short bites. So I mentioned you will have your effect on the short bites. We will come back on that in a minute. But let's see as well what effect it has on hardness. So if we only add the Yellowstone protease in a dough, you will also already have an effect on hardness. So it will be a bit softer. Of course, when adding freshness amylases, you will as well have a very nice effect on your softness. But we do see when we combine them together, you will still have your additional effect. Let's now come to the short bites. I've shown it in the beginning. So it's the force of tearing a product in two. And how do we measure that? So we measure that as well with a texture analyzer. We put a special probe on the texture analyzer. Here it's on a bun, but you can do that as well on a donut. And you measure, in fact, the maximum force you take to tear the product in two. So the maximum force is being displayed, and at the moment that you are breaking your product in two, you see the curve falling down, and in fact the total area under the curve, which is the total work, is a representation for the short bite. So the smaller the area under the curve, the shorter the bite. So we have done some different trials on it. Here you just see an example of a high gluten flour. So you see a certain total work. Whenever you add the protease, the Yellowstone protease on top, you will see a lower total work. And of course, if you evaluate sensorially, you will also see an effect on your evaluation that you will give a higher score on 5 on your short bites. And the same you can do on more flours. We have seen, okay, a protease is breaking down, in fact, a gluten network. So you can ask yourself the question, would a normal protease, which is already working earlier, also having an effect on short bite? Well, if you do the test, you see, in fact, that the total work is exactly the same as the reference. So you don't have any effect in a short bite, not if you measure it, but if you evaluate it sensorially as well, not. We have seen as well the effect on softness. Of course, amylases, maltogemic amylases are giving a nice effect on softness, but we wanted to see as well, would you have a possible effect on short bites? If you are using different doses, you don't have an effect. And of course, with this Yellowstone protease, if you are going to different dosages, you will have an additional effect on short bites. I promised you I would show it in the MixoLab as well. So here it is. So let's first look at the black curve. So the black curve is in fact a standard protease. And you will see already after 5-6 minutes that the black curve will start deviating from the other two curves. And so it's the moment when the protease starts to work, and you will have an influence on your dough rheology. You see that it's working quite long till the moment the enzyme is denaturated. If you now look to the two other curves, the red and the gray, so the gray is the Blanco and the red one is the Yellowstone protease, you see that they are really following the same curve. So nothing is being seen in dough rheology till the moment of 65 degrees. And then you really see the two curves opening. So then is a moment that we are partially starting breaking down the gluten network. Of course, when coming back to the first graph, we have shown in the beginning that preference of consumers is there at the top. And so we have shown how we can already partially give some softness, how we can really create that short bite, but how do we really get into that melting texture? So for that, we need to make an optimal combination. So this we will call our mixed melting fried. So it's in fact an ideal ratio of that Yellowstone protease together with the most efficient amylases. How much do we need to dose? You all know when we have a fried good, we have a very, very short frying time. So the enzyme has not a lot of time to work. So we really need to go to very high dosages, really optimize it so that whenever the time frame there is to work, that these enzymes will be able to deliver that. Let's go back once to the Mixolab. We have added 2 additional curves on top. So the yellow-orange one that you see, there we have included some sugar. So it's a kind of reference, and you see that it has been shifted a little bit to gelatinization because of the addition of the sugar. If we look then to the pink one, so that is a complete mix melting fried that has been added. And of course, you do see that the whole part of retrogradation, that the curve is really opening up. And so that is really giving your extra softness, your extra melting. What do consumers now think of it? And so whenever you would make a complete fried product, just freshly fried, and you would give 2 products to a consumer, it would be very difficult to distinguish. Because of course it is in the nature of a fried good to be very melting when it's freshly made, when it's still a bit warm. But what producers want is, of course, to still have a very nice texture as well after 4, 5, and are here even after 7 days. So that's why we ask consumers as well, can you evaluate a product in this case of 5 days? And what is your overall liking? So there is a clear difference in preference for the mix melting fried, and you can look at the 2 sides. It's a bit similar. On the right-hand side, you really see more the degradation, like I really like it, I very much like it, and so on. So you see a difference between 48 to 72%. So this is for consumers, but you can also ask it to an expert panel. Can you also evaluate the different sensorial parameters? And then we see the softness of a whole donut, the moistness, the short bite, and the melting. So all of the different parameters are in fact scored significantly higher. You can also put that on a principal component map. That's the same representation, just to make the relation back to where we really want it to be in the area of short bite melting. And all of that without influencing too much the fat absorption. Whoever has been making already some donuts herself, you know that 1-2% of variation in fat absorption is really minimal, that the industry has much bigger variations. So we have shown already 2 different sensory techniques, but we wanted to show as well a third one. So why do we believe this is a nice one to complement with? So the technique is called temporal dominance of sensations. And instead of asking an expert just the evaluation at one moment in time, you ask in fact to evaluate a product from the moment you have the first bite till the moment you completely swallow it. And at each moment in time, during that time frame, you will ask what is the dominance in sensation that you feel. And there was always a lot of noise in such graphs, so that you need to look at the ones that are really more popping up. And then you can see, in fact, we have compared 2 donuts. This one is one which is only containing freshness amylases. And when a person starts with the first bite, the first thing that pops up is short, a short bite. But it's in the nature of the product. A donut is short, so that is certainly the first sensation the person was thinking of. Then the next, which was popping up, was hard. Okay, the first might have been soft, but that popped up. And then what is interesting is, in fact, that as a third big thing, just before swallowing, that gumminess, stickiness is really popping up. What is now the difference if we compare it with the mixed melting fried? So there we see as well, in the beginning, that shortness popping up, but you see much, much higher. It's above the significant level, so it's really sticking to the people. Then softness is popping up, moistness, and all of that is in fact within the definition of melting. And because the melting is going so fast, you will be able to experience that. You see at the end the melting popping up, but what is interesting, you do not see anything of gumminess popping up, gumminess, stickiness, which you were able to alter, in fact, by adding that short bite. So I have seen, how we can create a certain texture, how we can deviate that, but we all know that wheat flour has as well a big impact on the finished good that you are making. So we have specifically looked to the flour, to 7 different flours from all over the world that were being used to make specifically donuts. You see most important parameters of the flour analysis are listed on the x-axis. So the 2 main different flours that we have, in fact, here are the Brazilian and the US one. So let's just deep dive in those 2. So when we only see those 2 flours, we have highlighted some of the main differences between the flours. And the Brazilian one has a low protein content. It has a lot of lack of extensibility. So you might say a P/L of 4. Do you even encounter that? In fact, last week I had visitors from the Middle East. They were mentioning to me that they very often get flours with a P/L of 6. So it's really something that is happening all over the place. So less amylase activity as well, a lower water absorption, and then the quality consistency is varying a lot. If you would make a donut of a Brazilian flour, comparing with the US flour, and you do not do any adaptations, of course, the product would look very, very poor. So you would have all kinds of defects, from going to a very sticky dough, a shape that is not at all okay because it's not elastic, a very small donut, high cracking, no white ring, an open crumb, an oily texture, so really, really not good. Without going into the details, what we typically do then is first looking at all the parameters, how we can fix first the volume, the tolerance, the shape, and when all of that is fixed, then we will have a look to fix the texture, till eventually you can make a product that looks very nice. So we have seen the influence of, here in this case of flour, we have shown some influence as well of the process of ingredients, of the different enzymes behind. So let's still have a look at the products. We have seen the map before. So we have seen the map of all the different fried goods from all over the world. We have started to implement this technology first for the classical donut. Now we are also fully implementing it for Berliners. In fact, this week we have a whole Berliner seminar ongoing in Austria. And I'm pretty sure there are many, many other fried applications from all over the world that can benefit from this melting texture. So, okay, we have seen an influence of flour. We have seen the influence of the process, and then of some very inspiring enzymes that can bring that real melting texture. we have seen that consumers really like a soft, short, and very melting product. So I can still explain you all further on the melting texture, but I think the most important is that you can experience it yourself when it's really melting away in your mouth. That is the melting sensation. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much
Yes.
for this interesting presentation. We open now the time for question and answers for the three presenters in the panel.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Off mic. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Maybe I will start with a question for IFF. You talked about the gluten reduction using fibers and guar.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about the science behind this reduction? Because it seems difficult to replace gluten with fibers.
Yeah. What we want, or we use the fibers for, is to create the stability you normally get from the gluten. Yeah. The volume the gluten gives. The volume the gluten gives, we use the enzymes, the amylases and the silenases. So very, you can say, traditional enzyme impact from that. And the fiber solution is then to find the right type of fiber to create the stability. We also compare it, as I saw with the guar, where we have different guar types, and the guar works slightly better, to be honest. Yeah? But again, if you want a clean label approach, the fiber is of course much better in that respect. So making the stability with the fiber, and of course also the hydrocoloride and the fiber is taking up the water that the gluten also do. Because if you make a gluten reduction, you can say with enzymes alone, you will miss some yield effect. Yeah. You will have less uptake of water. So it's combination of getting the same water in the system and then stabilize the dough as the gluten does. Yeah.
So practically is a reduction of gluten together with fiber and enzyme treatment.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Hola, buenas. Mi pregunta es para David. Bueno, soy Sara de Picky Foods. ¿Cómo de viable ves la incorporación de la IA en una línea de producción, en un proceso de producción? Me refiero, es evidente que ninguno de nosotros fabricamos ladrillos, fabricamos productos vivos en constante cambio, matrices muy complejas, enzimas, ingredientes, etcétera. Y es evidente que tenemos también equipos muy robustos, muy potentes, que nos dan datos a posteriori, análisis de masas, harina. Pero siempre son, para mí, datos pasivos. Y mi inquietud con la IA es, ¿podríamos utilizarla para ser más proactivos, activos, ¿no? Como has dicho, y poder incorporarla en un proceso de producción y en base a datos de otros equipos, combinarla con esta IA y que el propio proceso de producción se pueda adaptar? Al final hay muchas irregularidades, el tiempo es dinero, entonces hay veces que cuando vas a reaccionar ya es tarde, ¿no? Ya estás perdiendo dinero. Entonces mi pregunta es esa, ¿cómo la podrías incorporar, o si ves viable incorporarla a un proceso de producción? Gracias.
Sí, se oye. Sí, efectivamente. Es decir, yo creo que en lo que estás comentando has definido muy bien la situación. Y te puedo decir que sí. Es decir, la IA nos va a permitir aprender de la propia producción para identificar cuando se puede producir una situación, digamos, de anómala, vamos a decir, ¿no? Entonces tú, identificando, o sea, aquí la clave está en correlar variable de proceso con calidad de producto, de forma que cuando las variables de proceso se puedan mover en un sentido o en otro, el sistema te pudiera anticipar un problema de calidad. Aquí hay dos cuestiones. Una es la proactividad, es decir, actuar antes de que ocurra el hecho que no queremos que ocurra, donde realmente lo que vas a hacer o lo que plantearías es un mecanismo por el cual en el momento en que se produzca una desviación, que el sistema lo identifique y sea capaz de inferir qué puede ocurrir dada esa desviación, por un lado, y luego lo que yo llamo un sistema de diagnóstico, es decir, que el sistema pueda aprender en base a lo que ha ido ocurriendo y por las personas asociadas a todo ese proceso igual, porque en la medida en que tú, cuando se ha producido una situación, un parámetro de calidad fuera de rango, por ejemplo, ¿no? Eres capaz de identificar dónde ha estado el problema rápidamente, porque tú puedes hacer comparaciones de lote con lote, me refiero con una IA en producción, puedes rápidamente hacer esas comparativas, etcétera. Vas aprendiendo más de tu propio proceso, porque hay muchas partes que son difíciles porque ningún ser humano puede hacer millones de correlaciones por segundo, ¿no? Entonces, en el momento que tú tienes una IA integrada, digamos, en todo ello, vas a tener esa dualidad, es decir, por una parte predecir o intervenir antes de tiempo, y la segunda es diagnosticar y por lo tanto aprender del proceso, ¿no? Entonces, aquí lo importante es, vuelvo un poco a lo que decía en la charla, ¿no? Identificar claramente las variables clave, identificar cómo afectan esas variables clave a parámetros de calidad y generar, digamos, una lectura continua de esas variables de forma que puedan anticipar problemas de calidad y puedas actuar antes de que se produzca. Es decir, o dicho, digamos, muy sencillamente, si fuera un semáforo, cuando se pone en amarillo, digamos, voy a actuar, no voy a esperar a que se ponga en rojo, ¿no? Y entonces eso permitiría, sí, o sea, te digo que sí, te digo que hay empresas que están trabajando en ello ya. Y se pueden conseguir dos cosas. La primera, mejora de la calidad, y la segunda, mejora de la productividad también del proceso. ¿De acuerdo? Porque incluso en alguna compañía del sector, por ejemplo, bakery, se identificaban incluso con anticipación posibles paradas de la línea. Es decir, que realmente se puede utilizar. Es un proyecto, digamos, donde, un poco también siguiendo lo que decía en la charla, ¿no? Es un proyecto que requiere, digamos, la cooperación de mucha gente dentro de la compañía y un compromiso por parte de la compañía de ver que realmente esto puede aportar beneficio. Pero sí, así es.
Continuando con la misma pregunta, ¿cuál es la mejor manera de recopilar datos? Porque evidentemente en producción tenemos un montón de datos, pero no siempre los recogemos. Y desde luego no me imagino haciendo un Excel, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cuál es la mejor manera de recopilar todos los datos posibles para luego decidir cuáles son relevantes y cuáles no?
A ver, si hablamos de producción, estamos hablando de un proceso productivo, yo creo que muchas empresas ya recogen datos, muchísimas ya tienen pues sistemas tipo, no sé, SCADA, tipo de, en fin, incluso tienen MRPs que se llaman, Manufacturing Resource Planning, tienen sistemas que ya están recogiendo datos, ¿no? Si ese es el caso, lo habitual es que si esos datos de la producción se tienen que correlar con datos que son ajenos a la propia producción, lo normal es llevártelo a un lago de datos y a partir de ahí integrarlos con otras tipologías de datos y generar, digamos, esos análisis de IA. Habitualmente la manera de tomarlos es automática, es decir, máquinas que ya existen, ya tienen puertos de salida y que ya físicamente puedes llevarte el dato, o bien conexiones, digamos, a través de sistemas de información. Pero obviamente estamos hablando de generar siempre una base de datos o un lago de datos, si estamos hablando de datos de diferente naturaleza, un lago de datos, y sobre ese lago de datos desarrollar los algoritmos o aplicar los algoritmos para ver cuáles son los que mejor funcionan en función de cuál sea, digamos, el contexto donde se estén aplicando. Pero no sé si he respondido a tu pregunta o no sé si va por ahí. No he entendido bien. O sea, es decir, habitualmente lo que se hace es que los propios equipos de producción ya exportan datos, y habitualmente utilizando eso junto con sistemas MES, MRPs, bueno, como lo queramos llamar, que es un sistema software que integran esos datos, lo habitual es llevártelo a una base de datos. Pero no sé si esa es tu pregunta, si no, acláramelo y te contesto.
Sí. luego
Sí,
seguimos.
vale. Gracias.
Si no hay preguntas, yo mismo. This is a question for Evelien. You have mentioned that the texture of the donuts is preferred when it's extruded one. Nowadays, according to your knowledge, which is the proportion between the extruded and the divided one, if you know the data, and why then people is not switching to the extruded technique? Is more expensive, or what's the problem?
Yeah. So quite some companies have in fact extruders. So that was more the first way, I would say, of making donuts. Certainly in the US, you still see it quite often still. Of course, there I mentioned you have a lot of oil uptake. So oil is still a big cost contributor as well. I think we heard as well yesterday, you still need a lot of flour to be used so that it can really go through the extruders. And so you are very easily polluting, in fact, your fat. So you need to change it more often. It's typically not all expensive. All the equipment is expensive, of course, but an extruder is typically not the most expensive equipment. But you also need to use a more high quality flour. And so with a lot of deviation on flour and so on, it seems to be much more difficult to keep a certain consistency. So that's why that people are moving more and more away towards two other types. So that can be more sheeting, or that can be more dividing. A disadvantage of sheeting is that you have a lot of rework. So you need to take that into account. But okay, you can create a more natural extensibility in the donuts. You have still an average fat uptake there. And then when you look more into the dividing, so you have in fact you make your dough balls and you only need to stick out the middle one if you want a real donut, or if you keep it in, you don't have any rework. So there you have the least fat uptake. You can work with a bit more moderate flours as well. So there is a lot of variation, and the thing is, you need to adapt yourself to the process that you are using. So both the sheeting process and the dividing are more expensive processes, but seem to be more easy in keeping a better consistency. So, but we have seen you can adapt the final texture to the ones you really prefer, or the ones that are preferred in your country.
Another question for you, Evelien. So you mentioned that the performance of the sensory evaluation was noticeable from the 5th day of evaluation. So I wondered, what is evolving? Is the reference, or is the test? And if it's the test, how long does it evolve?
So in this case, we have shown the results indeed after 5 days. So I mentioned the first day, really when it's freshly made for a consumer, it's really difficult then to very much distinguish because it's just freshly made. But we do have as well already evaluations at day 2, day 3, day 4. You also already see the differences. We just took out here the example of the 5 days, but for sure, depending on the application, on the country as well, of what is wanted, because in some countries they really look only at extending from 24 hours to 48 hours. So then you need to see that difference already at 48 hours. But in other countries, it's more okay. We have already 3-4 days. We want to go to 5-6 days. So you can see certainly differences, but you need to adapt to what the local preferences or the local shelf lives needs to be.
Estáis muy tímidos, ¿no? Digo yo. O muy cansados, no lo sé. Pero bueno, nosotros tenemos algunas preguntas, pero lo interesante sería que vosotros... Mira, Mario, gracias.
Hola, yo tengo una... ¿Se oye bien? ¿Mejor ahora? Yo tengo una pregunta para David, una curiosidad, y es ¿qué recomendarías para igual mejorar los modelos predictivos o discriminatorios utilizando inteligencia artificial para, por ejemplo, la selección de materia prima? Porque claro, la materia prima con la que trabajamos en la parte de los alimentos es algo muy complejo. Entonces, podemos sacar un montón de parámetros, de parámetros descriptivos, de composición, de estructura. ¿No se oye? ¿Ahora mejor? ¿Ahora mejor? Sí. Entonces, no sé ¿qué opinas? ¿Hasta dónde deberíamos de sacar información de la materia prima para incorporar a los modelos? Cuanto más tengamos, digamos, mejor. Y luego la otra pregunta es si crees que se debería mejorar quizás la comunicación entre el personal dentro de la empresa que trabaja más con la caracterización de materia prima y las personas que trabajan más en procesado, para intentar pues establecer, digamos, relaciones, ¿no?, entre calidad de materia prima y el proceso. Entonces, no sé si me podrás decir un poco qué opinas o qué deberíamos de hacer para mejorar los modelos predictivos.
A ver, los modelos predictivos, ninguno funciona al 100%, ¿de acuerdo? Es decir, esto pero sí que te puedes acercar bastante. Habitualmente, cuanto más complejo es el problema, menos te acercas al 100%. Por lo tanto, de lo que se trataría, desde mi perspectiva, y sin conocer en profundidad, digamos, el contexto que me comentas, ¿no? Pero la clave yo creo que es identificar los elementos o las variables que definen, digamos, esa diferencia de calidades de materia prima, limitarlas, lógicamente, y establecer un modelo y evaluar qué tal funciona. Es decir, que no sé en cuántas dimensiones analizáis o cuántas variables utilizáis para categorizar, digamos, una materia prima, pero si no son muchas, no suele ser necesaria una ingente, vamos a decir, cantidad de datos, ¿no? Entonces, en la medida en que tú tienes datos históricos, puedes, hacer diferentes pruebas con los diferentes parámetros que tengas y ver, digamos, cuáles son los modelos que mejor funcionan, ¿no? Esa sería una posible aproximación. Eso en cuanto a lo que es la primera parte. La segunda parte que me comentabas, yo creo que es fundamental precisamente que exista, digamos, esa colaboración, que es una de las cosas, yo creo, que hacen que los sistemas funcionen mejor entre unos equipos y otros, ¿no? Al final, la materia prima, y yo creo que también es incluso desde un punto de vista organizativo, es clave, porque en la medida en que tú tengas claro cuál es la correlación, vamos a decir, que existe entre la materia prima y el resultado, digamos, de esa producción cuando aplicas esa materia prima, incluso a nivel organizativo, como te decía, puedes hasta negociar con proveedores de una manera o de otra, ¿no? Entonces, en la medida en que tú tienes esa información más detallada, con esa trazabilidad además, digamos, de cómo están funcionando, qué rendimiento está teniendo cada una. No sé, imagínate que descubres que con estos análisis que, no sé, que el 10% de la materia prima de un mismo proveedor está dando problemas, luego algo hay ahí, ¿no? Y a lo mejor tirando de ese hilo puedes llegar, digamos, a conclusiones mucho más interesantes todavía. Entonces, no sé, creo que es fundamental y evidentemente si no existe esa traza, debería construirse. Porque al final una organización es un proceso, una producción es un proceso complejo que cuantos más elementos podamos, digamos, conectar entre sí y analizarlos, ya no los seres humanos porque no nos da el cerebro para tanto, pero sí teniendo ya dispositivos, máquinas, inteligencias que lo pueden hacer, pues muchísimo más mejorará. Entonces, vamos, totalmente con lo que estás diciendo, absolutamente. No sé si he contestado. Sí.
Sí, gracias.
This is one question for you. In the case of a study of improving the Nutri-Score of the pastry, I have noticed that you haven't touched the salt. I mean, there is no fat reduction in salt, but for sure, if you want to improve the Nutri-Score, salt reduction is an issue. Have you studied something why it was not introduced here in your presentation?
In pastry, if that was the question, now in pastry you are not adding a lot of salt. So it's maybe only 0.5% on flour weight, and so it's not a lot to reduce. But I fully agree that in the new Nutri-Score system from last year, the salt level is really, really important. And I can say that we have been working on salt reduction, you can say, in normal bread types, especially in wholemeal and this kind of product where you want to go back down to A score, because the older Nutri-Score system almost always came out with an A for healthy bread, and certainly it turned out to be B. And main thing there was mainly the salt. Or the salt could move it back to A quite easily. So the salt, of course, have some important thing to do into the dough with strength and so on. This can be taken care of with typically gluten improving enzyme systems, as mentioned. That could be one. But the main thing with the salt is the taste. If you really reduce that in a standard bread, it is very lean, and taking out salt is really doing a bad thing to the taste. So what you can do there is, of course, work with alternative salts. You could use sea salts with the sodium. That gives a little more salty taste. We also have what we call salt modulator. So if you have a certain amount of salt, it can boost the salt perception you have. And that we have done test on wholemeal bread with quite good effect. But it's really the difficult part with salt reduction is the taste. Yeah, and but in pastry it's not so critical. Also because you have to move a lot of point to go lower, you can say, because originally there is not so much salt in the pastry. Yeah.
Thank you, Jens. ¿Hay alguna otra pregunta o podemos? Sí.
David, has hablado de red neuronal, has hablado de caja negra. Me pregunto si la exactitud de esos modelos algunas veces no va en contra de lo que podemos comprender.
Caja negra, red neuronal, efectivamente. O sea, a veces no está muy claro cómo se consiguen determinar esos pesos en esa ecuación, ¿no? que comentaba yo en la charla. A veces no se sabe muy bien cómo se hacen, y ya con la IA generativa pues es todavía más sorprendente, ¿no? Bueno, es un tema casi filosófico, ¿no? Va más en la línea de la filosofía. Yo creo que al final lo importante de toda esta cuestión es que si se utiliza bien, digamos, esta tecnología, pues podemos de alguna forma convertirnos, entre comillas, en superhumanos, en el sentido de que nos va a permitir, digamos, hacer cosas que de otra manera no podemos hacer, ¿no? Pero en fin, siempre se puede llegar a determinar por qué una IA ha conseguido un resultado. Siempre se puede. Lo que ocurre es que, bueno, es muy costoso. Pero en general sí que es verdad que en la mayoría de las ocasiones lo que se están haciendo fundamentalmente son regresiones. Siempre hay matemáticas por detrás.
¿No sería interesante algunas veces ser menos exactitud, pero comprender mejor lo que pasa? Identificar variables, por ejemplo.
Pero eso lo tenemos que hacer los seres humanos. Es decir, una IA le tienes que dar los datos de una determinada manera, y la interpretación de esos datos lo tienes que hacer un ser humano siempre. Entonces, quiero decir que no podemos dejar a la IA sola, porque podría hacer cosas que no queremos que hagan, ¿no? Y pueden dar datos que sean erróneos. Incluso la IA generativa, por ejemplo, muchas veces te dice cosas que no son verdad. O sea que siempre vamos a necesitar detrás o espero que sea así, un ser humano para que ponga un poco de orden en todo esto, ¿no? Pero en fin, sí que es verdad que en los modelos de caja negra, por ejemplo, los pesos no se sabe muy bien habitualmente cómo se consiguen, ¿no? Eso es cierto, pero bueno, es decir, lo que te digo, siempre detrás un ser humano, por favor.
Bueno, pues si os parece que ya va llegando la hora, llega el momento de cerrar esta sesión de la mañana. Simplemente varias cosillas. Os recuerdo que los workshops, por si alguien no lo sabe, tercera planta, salas N2 y N3. Tenéis en los distintivos el color de la ola que toca, el rojo en la de castellano, que es la N2, y la verde en N3. Los que tenéis en azul, supongo que hoy habrá menos influencia y podéis meteros a medida que se vayan llenando las salas, y supongo que habrá sitio y podréis asistir. Como os dije ayer, lo que hemos priorizado, digamos, es el acceso de panaderos, harineros y clientes vuestros, en definitiva. Me queda por simplemente pedir disculpas porque, como ya os dije el primer día, hemos tratado de admitir a prácticamente todo el mundo que quería apuntarse, y como ha habido un gran éxito de público, pues bueno, los espacios son limitados. Espero que no haya sido un inconveniente. Como sabéis, lo hemos hecho con la mejor intención, y si ha habido fallos, para eso os enviaremos mañana, aparte de una carta de agradecimiento y links a las diferentes áreas privadas y demás, y algo de fotos, espero también, una encuesta que os agradeceremos infinitamente que nos respondáis con vuestros comentarios, sobre todo cosas que pensáis que se pueden mejorar, dentro de lo posible, evidentemente. No me quiero enrollar mucho. Sí, muy importante. Quiero de nuevo agradecer a las empresas que nos han apoyado, a la asociación, a Monse, a Ignacio, a Lidia y a todos los equipos de logística, al Instituto Químico de Sarriá, que como siempre nos ha acogido y en sus brazos, y es una maravilla que podamos estar aquí. Y evidentemente a vosotros los asistentes, que como os dije el primer día, sois la razón de ser del BIET. Antes de irnos, para mí es un honor introduciros al doctor Borrós. El doctor Borrós, aquí a nuestro lado, ha tenido la amabilidad de venir para dar el cierre oficial, digamos, de las jornadas. El doctor Borrós es el director de Instituto Químico de Sarriá, de IQS, o ¿cómo le digo?
Dile IQS para que no me pegue.
IQS, vale, sí, porque como sabéis, igual os lo explica él, pero el IQS ha pasado de ser un Instituto Químico de Sarriá a una facultad multidisciplinar. Entonces, seguimos llamando IQS, pero aquí, aparte de química, hay muchísimas cosas y todas muy interesantes. En todo caso, no me enrollo más, simplemente muchas gracias de nuevo a todos, nos vemos en el vídeo 27 y le paso la palabra al doctor Borrós.
Muchas gracias por la amable introducción al IQS. Tú y yo sabes que siempre hablamos de Químic y por lo tanto ya está, pero hacia afuera la marca es IQS. Bueno, no sabía en qué idioma lo iba a hacer, pero ya que has arrancado tú en castellano, después de ir algunas palabras en inglés para la gente de fuera. Lo sé, pero para que me esfuerce también en hacerlo en inglés. Bueno, para mí es más que un honor, yo diría que es una alegría volver a que IQS sea el anfitrión de un congreso que tiene tanto peso en nuestra historia, ¿no?, que lo organiza la Asociación de Antiguos Alumnos, los alumni, con otras muchas instituciones, pero que ha sido un poco una razón de ser de ciertos grupos profesionales en el sentido de dar y una imagen de lo que se puede hacer cuando tienes una asociación de antiguos alumni, un alumni suficientemente fuerte. Ya sabes que tú y yo nos discutimos por el tema de la grabación de los vídeos y cambiamos la grabación de los vídeos especialmente para el BIET, aunque hoy he visto que lo estáis grabando de otra manera, pero eso no significa que no haya un compromiso con vosotros a este nivel. Y también un poco muy feliz porque en el fondo hoy se condensa muchas horas de trabajo de todo el equipo de la organización y como todos sabemos, organizar un evento con este nivel de participación siempre es complicado. Escogemos esta época del año porque nosotros ya no tenemos clases y no hay exámenes y por lo tanto también nos permite tener mayor flexibilidad desde el punto de vista de las aulas y desde el punto de vista del bar. Deciros que estamos en un periodo constante de obras desde hace 5 años y probablemente en el próximo BIET, a lo mejor yo no doy la despedida, nada otro, pero sí que podremos todavía disfrutar de otras instalaciones todavía más agradables de estar para que tengáis este congreso. Sentiros, que ya espero os hayáis sentido, pero sentiros bienvenidos en IQS, acabar de disfrutar del congreso y sobre todo, bueno, os espero ver o que el próximo director del IQS os vea en la próxima, digamos, sesión de este congreso. Muchas gracias.
A ti.